Let's switch gears, if you don't mind, for just a second, because we had a very specific situation that we worked on with you and your firm. You had been gracious enough. We had a client, we were getting ready to sell a property. We knew that we were going to need a power of attorney to be able to get all the paperwork done. The husband was elderly. They were moving out of town, if I remember correctly. Someone from your firm, I think maybe it was Bobby, the amazing Bobby, went out and did some paperwork, so we had all the stuff that we needed. And then, unfortunately, as soon as they moved, the husband suddenly passed away. And so we thought, hey, no problem, we can still sell the property. It works out fine because we already have the paperwork, so the wife can sign for the husband, so we're all good. But there was a little hiccup in it, and that was the property went to the, and you correct me if I'm wrong, the property went to the wife in the will, but the kids were on the deed with the father as joint tenants with rights of survivorship, which means technically the ownership interest would go to them. So did I set that up correctly?
Yes. When I thought about that scenario, I'm like, okay, why did he do that? And that would have been my question. What was that rationale? And so, because the next thing he did is he had a will that said, when I die, I want the house to go to my wife. I'm like, okay, well, these two things are not equal. They don't, they're incongruent. And so what ends up happening is they could transfer the property, right, to the wife. But what happens, and I think your question is, well, the will said it goes to the wife, and I'm like, yeah, but joint tenants with rights to survivorship beats out the will.
I was going to say, because that is in the transfer of the title, so it makes it almost superior. No, not almost. It makes it superior to the will. What needed to have happened would be him to redo the deed and maybe do it with him and his wife as joint tenants with rights of survivorship, or remove the kids so it's just him and let the property transfer through the will. Is that correct?
Yeah, they would have had to remove themselves, or they would have had to do the transfer.
Oh, they would have had to have agreed to remove themselves because they would have given the deed from all three of them back to the dad.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense.
What he would have done is he would have wanted that property to go back into his name completely. They would have had to quit claim it or, warranty deed it or whatever to him. Well, we were talking about last time. And then he holds it solo because he had a will.
Right.
And so because he owned it individually, he would say, okay, I bought this for $100,000. I just sold it for $1 million. And the wife would get the property with a stepped up basis for tax purposes.
Right.
So that would have been the way to think about it. But you forget along the way about how those two interact. Mm-hmm. And that's where y'all got caught right in the middle of that.
And you mentioned something, and I don't think I really understood where you were going with it or the purpose for you mentioning it, but you mentioned if it had gone to the wife through the will, it would have gone to her at a stepped up basis. But I think what you were trying to allude to is because the kids were already on the deed, it does not go to them at a stepped up basis. Their basis is determined all the way back when the property was purchased or maybe when they were added to the deed. Is that right?
Exactly. They may have put in a new bathroom or a second floor or something and increase the basis, but it goes back to the beginning, and people forget about that when they, because when you go to sell it, that'll pop you right there.
It will. And I mean, there's also some complications. I mean, you get one of the kids, and let's just say they get in bad shape from a financial standpoint, and now that's a kid. They have 100% ownership in that asset, and somebody can come and take that from them and from everybody else, which is kind of a weird thing. So I think we really have to be careful.